They say the Enlightenment ended the age of superstition, that by the mid-1700s, reason had conquered fear. But on one cold August morning in 1749, in a small Bavarian convent near Würzburg, a woman was still burned for witchcraft. Her name was Maria Renata Singer von Mossau, nun, scholar, noblewoman, and the final victim of Europe's centuries-long witch hysteria. Tonight we step back into the flickering light of her trial, into a world where faith and paranoia shared the same altar, and where a single accusation could turn prayer into a death sentence. This is the true story of the last witch execution in Europe, a story buried under church stones and candle wax, a story they never meant you to hear. The night they came for her, the abbey bells didn't ring. The wind was still, heavy with incense and fear. Inside the stone corridors of the Unterzell convent near Würzburg, candles guttered low as whispers moved from cell to cell. The sub-prioress had been accused of witchcraft. At first, the sisters didn't believe it. Maria Renata Singer von Mossau had been part of their lives for decades. A stern, learned woman from an old Bavarian noble family, known for her discipline and her deep, unbending faith. But faith, in that year of 1749, could not protect you from suspicion. For months, the convent had been troubled. Nuns complained of strange visions in the night, shadows that crawled up the walls, voices murmuring prayers backward, crucifixes found turned upside down at morning prayer. Some claimed they'd been bitten or scratched by unseen hands. Others collapsed mid-mass, screaming that demons were among them. The confessor, a local priest, recorded the first notes of hysteria in April. He wrote that one novice convulsed violently at the sight of holy water. Another fainted when the host was lifted. Soon, half the convent was caught in fits. The physician said it was nerves, melancholia religiosa, the madness of women deprived of air and freedom. But in Catholic Bavaria, where the memory of the 30 Years' War still lived, there was another explanation: witchcraft. Maria Renata's own past made her a perfect target. Before taking vows, she had lived as a lady of leisure, educated, fluent in Latin and French, curious about philosophy and medicine. Rumors whispered that she'd once studied the forbidden arts, alchemy, the making of tinctures, the reading of strange symbols. Those same rumors, buried for decades, were resurrected by frightened voices desperate to name their tormentor. At first, the bishop's envoy dismissed it, but when more than a dozen nuns claimed to see Maria's face hovering in their dreams, reciting blasphemies in a language no one could understand, the matter reached the diocesan court. What began as gossip hardened into accusation. They came to question her in the refectory, 3 men in black robes and powdered wigs. They asked whether she had ever sworn an oath to the devil, whether she had consorted with spirits, whether her nightly solitude was spent in prayer or in conjuring. She denied it calmly. "I have no master but Christ." But the fits in the convent grew worse. Nuns tore their habits, foamed at the mouth, spoke in voices not their own. One claimed she saw Maria Renata's shadow stretching impossibly long along the chapel floor. That night, the abbess found candles burned down to pools of blood-colored wax in her cell, and that was enough. By July 1749, Maria Renata was arrested and transported under guard to Würzburg. The city was no stranger to such scenes. A century earlier, it had burned hundreds of so-called witches, in a frenzy so vast that even children were accused. Yet the Enlightenment had supposedly swept that darkness away. Philosophers spoke of reason, Voltaire mocked superstition, And still, in the dim courtrooms of the prince-bishopric, the machinery of the old faith ground on. The interrogation followed familiar steps. First, the ecclesiastical trial, long hours of questioning, the candlelight hot on her face, then the physical inspection for witch marks. They found a mole above her shoulder blade and called it proof of diabolic contact. Under the pressure of threats and exhaustion, Maria Renata's composure cracked. She confessed not to pacts or Sabbaths, but to being tormented by temptation, to reading books not suitable for women, to doubting at times the certainty of salvation. The scribes twisted her words into a confession of heresy. Witnesses were brought forward, nuns trembling and cross-clutching, recounting visions of black dogs and burning altars. Each testimony fed the next. What had begun as fainting spells became proof of a satanic conspiracy within holy walls. Maria Renata's trial dragged through summer. Outside, the vineyards of Franconia ripened in the sun, while inside, in the bishop's hall, the question was no longer whether she was guilty, only how to make the judgment appear righteous. At last, on August 21, 1749, sentence was passed. She was condemned for witchcraft, heresy, and the corruption of souls. The record says she wept quietly when it was read, then asked for confession. The priest wrote, "She bore herself with dignity, prayed for her accusers, and declared she forgave them." At dawn, on the day of execution, the city gathered near the bridge over the Main. Merchants closed their stalls. The university sent its students to witness the lesson of faith. Maria Renata, 69 years old, was led out in a simple gray robe. Her hair had been cut. In her hands, she held a crucifix. They beheaded her swiftly before burning the body, the church's gesture of mercy, sparing her the flame alive. The crowd said the smoke rose straight up without wind, a sign perhaps that heaven had accepted her soul. Others said they saw shapes in the fire, faces, wings, the flicker of something watching. After her death, the fits in the convent ceased. The abbess reported peace restored. Yet travelers passing Unterzell claimed they heard weeping in the chapel at night. And once, a novice swore she saw an old woman in gray kneeling before the altar, lips moving silently. The case of Maria Renata Singer von Mossau became known as Europe's last witch execution. It stunned scholars who thought such madness extinct. Newspapers in Paris and Vienna printed it as an embarrassment to the faith. In the years that followed, Bavaria quietly abolished the old statutes on witchcraft. But in Würzburg's cathedral records, her name is still there, not as martyr, not as saint, but as relapse of faith. Her ashes scattered on the riverbank, where now children play and tourists walk unaware that beneath their feet lies the dust of a woman who became the final echo of a centuries-long nightmare. And so the story ends where reason finally overtook fear, but only barely. For even today, in the ruins of the Unterzell convent, the local caretakers say that when the wind is right, the bells that did not ring on the night of her arrest sometimes chime by themselves. They call it the last toll of the witch's soul, the sound of faith and doubt forever entangled in stone. If the walls of Unterzell could speak, they would tell us this: fear never truly dies, it only changes its name. If you felt the chill of this forgotten story, stay with us, because the past still hides 1,000 ghosts waiting to be heard. Subscribe and step deeper into the legacy of fear.